It's tough to say the gospel today brings us good news. Did you notice that at the beginning and at the ending of each gospel, the priests or the reciters always say a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Saint, today is Matthew. And at the end of the gospel, the priests always say the gospel of the Lord, right? You know that, right? And the gospel means good news. So what's the good news today? Is it good news or bad news? Is it a happy news or sad news for us today? To be invited to the king's invitation. To be invited to the wedding feast of the king's son. What do you think? Is it good news or bad news that we have been invited to the wedding banquet? And the answers depend on you and me. How we hear the gospel and how do we respond to it. The answers depends on how we hear the gospel and respond to it. So you know the story, right? The parable has two main points, the king's invitation and our responses. So let's talk about the king's invitation. Did I say the king's invitation? This is not just ordinary people, the king invitation. So to begin, Jesus tells the parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. And the king invites his guests to come. Imagine the king invite you and me. Okay, all right, we don't have a king in our country, right? But let's say, imagine the president, President Trump, invite you and me to his son's wedding. Yeah? Okay, some of you invite. I know, just hypothetically, just imagine, that's all. Would you go, right? Would you go? Okay, some of you might not like President Trump. What about, let's pick another person. How about Pope Francis? Okay, all right. Most of you like Pope Francis, okay. Imagine Pope Francis invite you and me, not his son obviously because he's not married, to his nephew's wedding. Imagine that. What would you say? Of course, you and I probably think, wow, Pope Francis invited me? That's pretty cool, right? Would you go? Yes, no, maybe. Now, it's safe to say that most of us would feel honored and definitely want to go. How can you not? And this leads me to the second point of the gospel today, our responses, the guest responses. So there's two main responses, yes and no. So the first group of guests respond no. The first group of guests respond no. Are you surprised? Now, imagine Jesus talked to the chief priests and the elders. When they hear the story, they would be shocked. Not just surprised, but shocked. How could you not say yes to the king's invitation? They would be shocked to hear that the guest could say no to the king's invitation, the most important person in the whole world. And what did the king do? The king sent another group of servants to invite the same group of guests again and tell them a bit more descriptive party. This party is awesome. The wedding banquet is ready with the best chef ever, Father Boom Martinez, who cooks all kinds of delicious food for you, the best steaks, the best lobster, and the best wine from San Diego. Right, Father Boom, you know Father Boom, right? He's pretty good. He's a good cook. He cooked for us the delicious food last Friday. And this group of guests say basically ignore and went away. One to his farm, another to his business. And others mistreated them, the servants, and killed them. So here's the question. Why did the guests say no to the king's invitation? Why did the guests say no to the king's invitation? The scriptures say one to his farm, another to his business, and some even mistreat and kill the servants. So here's my take on it. The guests mainly focus on farming, business, and the business of life. The business of life becomes dominant, that everything else becomes secondary. And that's why they say no. As Jesus once said, where your heart is, there is your treasure. Where your heart is, there is your treasure. Is that true? I find what Jesus said is so true. I can testify that in my life. A friend of mine told me that when her husband watched sport, I better not bother him. Most of the time, I feel okay. Once in a while, I feel like it's really bothering me. I need his help. So I went in front of the television to get his attention. But it still did not work. Why? Because his heart, which is her husband's, is fixed on the game. And everything else becomes secondary. Second story. 2 years ago, I talked to one of my former students. Let me name him Tony. And Tony was extremely active in like Neiman Center type in CLC. CLC is like Kyrie. I know a number of you are Kyrie, right? Or InterVarsity, Catholic faith-based. And the whole idea is, he said that when he was in CLC, he loved to go to Sunday Mass, he loved to go to the weekly meetings, and he loved to help the poor. But after graduate, he got a job, and the job opened different doors for him. He has a chance to travel to different states. At first, he still make efforts to go Sunday Mass, right? But as time went on, he noticed that he got lazy and caught up with making money. And he justified that, well, I need money to pay off my loans and also help my family. It sounds pretty honorable, right? And he told me the job and making money was so powerful, I felt like I lost a sense of peace and joy that I used to have when I was in CLC, in the Newman Center. Attend Sunday Mass, attend weekly CLC meetings, and help the poor. I was basically sleepwalking all these years until I met Nancy, which is his fiancée, and she brought me back to the church. Now, if you notice, during the period, there's a few years, Tony set his heart on job and money. And when God invited him to go to Sunday Mass, which is a wedding feast, he said no. Why? Because his heart set on job and money. Now, I'm not saying that working and making money are the bad things. It's very good. As a matter of fact, God wants us to do that. But when those things become dominant, to the point that everything else, including God's invitation, become secondary. Where your heart is, there is your treasure. Where your heart is, there's your treasure. It's a heart open to the king's invitation to attend his son's wedding feast. So the first group of guests say no to the king's invitation because their hearts set on something else. Now the second group of guests say yes. Right? So that's most of us here. The story went on to say, the king decided to send his servants to go out into the main roads and invite everyone, whether janitors, professors, doctors, students, nurses, black, brown, white, Catholic, non-Catholic, come on into the party, right? And then there's a bracket. When the king saw one guest without a wedding garment, he told his attendant to bind that guest's hands, cast him into darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. This is very strange, right? Very strange. The king, which is in the story, symbolizes God the Father, invites everyone to the wedding reception and then kicks some of them out. To me, that's very strange. Why? Because of one reason. No wedding garment. Now, if we look at the Gospel of Luke, which is a very similar story, Luke described differently. the parable of the wedding feast is very different. Everyone is invited. Some say no, others say yes. But the king did not kick out anyone from the party. But the Gospel of Matthew, on the other hand, the king kicks out one of his guests because of one reason: no wedding garment. Now, in our life, you know that when we go to the wedding, right? I think it's pretty kind of like unspoken expectation that we wear the wedding something nice, right? That fit with the wedding. And similarly, the king expects us to wear the wedding garment. And obviously, this is a parable, right? Symbolize to attend his son's wedding. So what does the wedding garment symbolize? What does the king want when we come to the wedding banquet? What does the wedding garment symbolize? For Matthew, it symbolizes the garment of Jesus' club. For Matthew, the garment symbolizes the garment of Jesus' club. Just like when we join the club, we wear a t-shirt, right? Basically, we say that I'm a member of that club, I belong to this club, and I stand for and I believe in everything the club represents, right? So when we become a member of Jesus' club, we also wear Jesus' t-shirt. We belong to Jesus. You know, on the baptism day, remember that? When we were baptized, we wear the wedding, we wear in the baptismal clothes. We basically saying that, God, I belong to you. And God saying to us, you belong to me. Wear this baptismal cloth. What does this look like? You belong to Jesus, and what Jesus stands for? What Jesus stands for? What Jesus stands for is about one thing: love and mercy, caring for the poor and the marginalized in society. In other words, our membership, our faith, our relationship with Jesus is measured by how we treat the least in society. Our faith, our relationship with Jesus, our membership is measured by how we treat the least in society. As Matthew described in chapter 25, when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. A stranger, you welcome me. Naked, and you clothe me. Ill, and you care for me. In prison, and you visit me. This is what Jesus stands for. This is what Jesus stands for. And wants you and me to join his club and come to the wedding feast and have a great time. Is that a good news or bad news? To wear this wedding garment, to treat the least in society. So here's the good news. The wedding party is right here, right now. Yes, each time we come to celebrate Mass every Sunday, we basically say yes to the King's invitation to attend the wedding banquet. So let's dress up with a wedding garment and have a good time. Let us just say amen.